Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 274. We are in the last days of the month of Menachemov, quickly approaching the month of Elul. Yes, the awesome month of Elul, which is the last month of the Hebrew year when we count not by the lunar cycle, but by the annual cycle that starts with Tishrei, meaning not from Chodesh Nisan, which then Elul is, of course, the sixth month, but the conclusion of the year and the preparation for the new year of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, Tishrei. So, of course, most appropriate is to begin with what is timely. As I pointed out a number of times, when you look at the calendar, the Jewish calendar, it's a fascinating, remarkable document. More than a document, more than a calendar that just measures time and gives us the ability to schedule appointments and schedule our daily routines. It also is a mirror image that reflects the cycles of life. So if you think of month of Av as a month of sadness, especially the beginning of the month, till the 9th of Av, then from that sadness we begin the process of comforting and consolation, which we're now in, the 7 weeks of Shiva de Nechemta, the 7 weeks of consolation, of comfort, that leads right into Rosh Hashanah. But the story doesn't just begin there. The story actually begins months ago when the Jewish people left Egypt and became a nation after 210 years of suffering, horrible and terrible genocide and bondage. So on the 15th of Nisan, the Jewish people leave Egypt. Mitzrayim is what? Leaving our limitations, our constraints. So every one of us in life will go through this process of leaving our limited place and experiencing some transcendence. Everybody on their own level. 50 days later, count 49 days of the Omer, 50 days later, we arrive at Sinai, receive the mandate from God, the blueprint for life. And here too, transcendence is beautiful, but you need to turn that into a concretized system, and hence the mandate called the blueprint Torah. 40 days after that, Moshe Rabbeinu returns with the first set of the tablets. What day is that? The 17th of Tammuz. And he sees that the Jewish people built a golden calf. In our personal cycle of life, it would mean that after we experience transcendence and freedom, after we receive the blueprint, we betray our own selves and our own destiny and our own mission and mandate. And we do so with great peril, terrible experience, but all is not lost. Moshe does indeed break the tablets in order to save the Jewish people, as we've discussed a number of times, because that was the contract. And he goes back on the mountain on the 17th of Tammuz for another 40 days. That 40-day period is right now, we're in that 40-day period coming to the conclusion of it. Why does he go back up? He already received the tablets. He goes up to beseech God to forgive the people. So this would include the 17th of Tammuz, the 3 weeks. It includes the 9 days, Tisha B'Av, and the days subsequent to that, all the way till when is 40 days from the 17th of Tammuz to Rosh Chodesh. There are two opinions when he goes back a third time, whether it's the first day of Rosh Chodesh, which would be next Shabbos, or the second day of Rosh Chodesh, which would be next Sunday. But that's not relevant to our discussion. And it says these were not pleasant days. These were not days where he was successful. How does that play itself in our lives? That after a betrayal, after a violation, after a betrayal of ourselves, of our destiny, of our mandate, of our commitments, we begin the process of trying to heal. But it doesn't come easily because it was a very serious betrayal. It wasn't a small matter. They had built a golden calf. They replaced God with a piece of gold, with money, with power, with ego. So it's not a small process, not an easy process. And then he comes back down. So right now Moshe is finishing his second period of 40 days, comes back down and goes back a third time. Rosh Chodesh Elul, first or second day of Rosh Chodesh. In other words, either the 30th of Av or the 1st of Elul. He goes back a third time, count 40 days from Rosh Chodesh Elul, 30 days of Elul, 10 days of Tishrei is 40. Yom Kippur, the 10th of Tishrei. So on Rosh Hashanah, technically, Moshe Rabbeinu was up on the mountain the third time. That's where he was, Rosh Hashanah that year. And Yom Kippur, he returns, and this time he's successful. Successful with what? Successful with gaining forgiveness. And we say it every year, Yom Kippur night, right after Kol Nidre, 3 times, that Hashem says, Salachti kitvarecha. I have forgiven them as you have spoken. So Moshe, we don't just say God forgave, but it came through initiative of maybe the greatest event in all of history, a human being arguing with God and not taking no for an answer and breaking down the door until he succeeds. And he gave us that single most powerful force in life called hope. So you look at this story, this cycle, this calendar, and it's fascinating. It's awesome how it reflects life. Who hasn't gone through all these stages? We all have our transcendence. We follow our blueprint. We all fall, and then we try to correct and heal. And what's the end of the story? We can heal. He comes back with the second tablets, which in some way are even greater than the first. And from then on, we have the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, the ability to constantly regain and reclaim that which was lost or broken. So whatever part of life you're in, whether you're in the stage of innocence, or a stage of loss of innocence, or a stage of regrets and concerns and anxiety over the mistakes we've made, this cycle, this calendar is there exactly for us. So here we go, from Pesach to Shavuos is 50 days, 3 sets of 40 days, 120, 170 days, essentially half a year covers this journey, this ups and downs, from Pesach concluding with Yom Kippur. And of course, after Yom Kippur comes the celebration of what we have gained and reclaimed, which is the celebration of Sukkot, leading to the climax and to the apex of it on Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. So there you can add another 13 days, 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and then all the way till the end of Simchas Torah, almost the end of Tishrei. So you have over 185 days of the year, this whole cycle that, as I said, mirrors and reflects who we are. When studying this and learning about it and seeing its power, it's one of the things that motivated me to write the book 60 Days, A Spiritual Guide to the High Holidays. Literally that as a journey through these 2 awesome months of Elul and Tishrei, day by day, this journey covering the entire spectrum of life experiences. So there you have Chassidus applied. Chassidus discussed at length every step of the way. So as we go from the end of Av into Elul, as I've cited a number of times, the Shalah that the Tzemach Tzedek brings, the Rebbe also cites it. At Aryeh, the mazel of this month of Av, Aryeh, from the mazel, from the sign and the power of this month, the Leo, lion, creates Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Heshayna Rabbah. Aryeh is an acronym for those 4 periods in time. So you see there again the story. It's not just a continuation, a continuum. It actually one gives birth to the other. So the Aryeh, which could be seen as such a negative thing, the destruction of the temple through Aryeh and Nebuchadnezzar is compared to that lion who destroyed the lion. In the month of the lion, Al-Mnasta Yalkut Shmeni says, in order that the lion, referring to God, comes and rebuilds the lion, the third temple, in the period of in the lion, which would be of, but that gives birth to Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Heshayna Rabbah, which is the conclusion essentially of Yom Kippur, the chsima, the sealing of the destiny of our lives next year. So this is where we are right now, the conclusion of Elul, the last days of Moshe Rabbeinu's 40th, second period of 40 days on the mountain, preparing ourselves for next Shabbos. This year Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh Elul. We blessed the Rosh Chodesh Elul yesterday. And this coming Shabbos will be the first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul, which then leads to the second day. So you have again, Elul is the 30th day of Av and the first day of Elul. So you see an interface, because everything is one story. It's one narrative. So even when you're in an Av experience, it immediately is also the first day of Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul, I should say. And that teaches us that no matter where you are in your roller coaster of your life, you have a place to be able to grow, to be able to reconcile, to be able to build. And there's no such thing as hopeless, God forbid. That's the overall lesson from this period. This coming Shabbos will also be the A. So one thought on the Parsha, the Eya Nechi Nesen Lefnechem Hayem Es HaBrocha. Behold, I give you before you today the blessing and the opposite of blessing. These are, of course, the words that Moshe Rabbeinu uttered and spoke the last 37 days of his life in this world. Chodesh Shvat, when he began speaking in the beginning of Parsha Dvarim until Zayin Adar, when Moshe would go up on Har Nevoy, as the end of Mishnah Torah, the end of this book will tell us. So we're now in Parsha Re'eh, the 4th chapter of this book. And one beautiful thought, powerful thought. When you say Yechi Nesen Lefnechem, Nesen is always, refers to Nesen means to bestow, to give, like a matona. Matona is called the giving of. Kol ha-Nesen ba'ayin yofer Nesen. Anyone who gives with a good eye. So it's a pleasant thing to give a gift. So the obvious question is, okay, to give a gift of blessing makes sense. The blessing. But how could you refer to the opposite of a blessing as a gift? What kind of gift is that? It's the opposite of a gift. And the Rebbe explains that the gift is the clarity to know what is a blessing and what is not a blessing. So when you're traveling down the road of life and you come to a crossroads, and you don't know which way is the right way to go, should you go to the right, to the left? And someone tells you, go this path, this will lead you to beautiful things, that's of course a blessing. But what happens if they don't tell you? They tell you, don't take this path because it can lead you to terrible things, to destructive things. That's an equal blessing because it's clarity. So the gift that is here is not, God forbid, the opposite of blessing. To know what's opposite of blessing. And that's the gift that God gives us, both to know what to do and also what to avoid doing. Because in a healthy life, you need both. You need to know how to plant the seeds to make sure the flowers grow, but you also have to know how to weed the garden to make sure there are no impediments and negative influence that can stunt and block the flowers to emerge. So psychologically and emotionally in our personal lives, we have mitzvah sesa, we have lo sesa. And mitzvah sesa tell us what to do, what's appropriate, but you also want to know what not to do, what to avoid doing. And both are equal blessing. So the Eya Nechem Nesen Lefnechem Hayem gives us that message. It's a tremendous message in so many ways in our lives. Sometimes you go for advice. You don't just want to know what to do, you also want to know what to avoid doing. That's what good professionals will tell you, things that people who've been there already, who've gone through an experience, they can tell you, don't try that, that will not work, try this. So that's the blessing of this week's chapter. And of course, as we're preparing to go into Elul, that's what we're looking for. Elul is a month of cheshbon, a month of accounting, and a month of preparation for the new year. So we're looking to have the clarity to correct. So sometimes we know what needs to be done. Sometimes but we don't know what needs to not be done. And many times we're in denial, or we're ignorant, or we minimize. So it's critical to know in Elul both things, to know how to heal and do things that are proper, that help and are conducive to healing, but also know what are the things that also impede the healing process. And here I talk healing, I mean in the personal and emotional and spiritual level. Okay, the cross-reference, which I always do, because this is a program that's been going on for 6 years, so you can imagine for 6 years we've covered many of the topics, Elul and Re'eh. So I cross-reference this to episode 79, 129, 175, 224. So there, in those episodes, which can all be found at ChassidusApply.com, a new site dedicated to the resources for this program and related. You can find these archives in their entirety. They're also time-stamped on the YouTube desktop or laptop version, so you can actually find the exact place where the piece you're looking for. In addition, there's an excellent search that you can look for it by words or topics or themes to find different topics that you may be looking for. Yes, I've been encouraged by many, many people asking, more than encouraged, actually demanding, I can say, to publish something in writing that can be like a book that's like almost like an encyclopedia of taking the topics that we've covered, which have been hundreds and hundreds, which are generated by you, listeners, who write questions in anonymously at our, I should mention now, the forum, which is again at ChassidusApply.com/ask. You can write any question, nothing is off limits, nothing is taboo, and we'll cover them. We are always backlogged a bit, but we're moving along, and every week new questions are covered. I'm continuously fascinated by the fact that there are more questions that come in Guess when you're really covering life, life does not have just a few questions. Every challenge, every issue that comes up poses another dilemma, and therefore questions that keep arising. So thank you for participating, and not just participating, really making it happen, both by listening, but even more so by generating and suggesting different questions. So please use that opportunity. And so yes, we have plans to do so. We obviously, everything is ein kemach ein Torah. We need to have funding. So if someone's interested out there to help fund a project like that, which is to take these ideas and put them in some document form, meaning a digital form or book form, so people can easily access them directly, and of course edited, we would definitely be appreciative. And you can contact me directly at my email address, Simon, SIMON, @meaningfullife.com, or you can write in the forum as well and just give us your contact info and we will communicate with you, reach out to you. Thank you for that. And this is also a good opportunity that on every level we can use your support to dedicate a program or a series of programs to the memory of a loved one or honor of a loved one. An excellent opportunity to reach thousands and thousands of people who are listening to this program and benefit from it in the merit and schus of someone you dedicate this program to. Okay, with that, questions. The first question we're going to address today. According to Chassidus, what relationship should we have with the physical objects in our lives? Clothing, furniture, gifts we receive, antiques, etc. A little more spelled out. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, can we elevate all neutral objects, like furniture, vessel, jewelry, ornaments, clothes, etc.? Does Judaism believe this kind of objects have good, bad energy in them? What about pre-owned objects we receive as a gift, for example? What about antiques? Should we get rid of objects that we feel don't have good energy, or should we try to elevate them? Thank you and blessings. Okay, very good question. Practical question. Chassidus absolutely has what to say about it, starting from the Baal Shem Tov himself. There are things that Chassidus Chabad elaborates upon, and you have to find it hinted to in the Baal Shem Tov. There are things the Baal Shem Tov himself addressed. In a number of places in the Torahs of the Baal Shem Tov, and for the record, most of the Torahs of the Baal Shem Tov, if not all, were spoken by the Baal Shem Tov and written down by his students. So we have the different Sfarim, whether it's Kesher Shem Tov or Tzavos HaRevosh, or the Teilus Yaakov Yosef, and the other Sfarim that bring Ben Perez Yosef, and others that bring Torahs of Baal Shem Tov that have already been collected. There's a sefer called Baal Shem Tov Al Torah. I'm not going to go through all the literature of the Baal Shem Tov. So Baal Shem Tov in a number of places addresses this in a very direct way, and he says the following, paraphrasing. Everything that is in our possession, whether it's through ownership, meaning we bought it, or it was given to us as a gift, or you found it even. We're talking about al pi halacha that you're allowed to keep it. Anything that comes your way means there's a reason it came your way. Based on the principle of Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence. It came your way because that item, that object, has in the divine sparks, because everything in existence would not exist if the divine purpose of that was not there. Nothing is here by accident. It came your way, it means that it has divine sparks, and it's part of the divine sparks allocated to you to elevate. So this would include furniture and clothing, everything. He also says when a person finishes, meaning let's say you either lose the object, or you give it away to somebody, or you sell it and so on, it means your role in elevating those sparks has come to an end. But as long as you have it and you've obtained it, so what does that mean? That's not just there for your comforts, to use a table, a chair, jewelry, ornaments, or whatever it may be. It's for you to use it for a purpose that is divine. Kol ma shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu ba'olam elei bara ela l'chvedei. The end of Pirkei Avos, the end of chapter 6, we say, everything God created in the world, He created, but not for any other purpose, but kvedei, for His glory and honor. So, kol masecha l'shem shamayim, all your actions should be directed toward the sake of heaven. V'chol d'rechecha de'eyu, in all your ways you should know God, meaning in everything seeing the object or the item as an opportunity, a spiritual opportunity to grow personally and to make other people grow. You have a table, not just to use it to sit by and read something or learn, to eat a meal, but to use it to learn Torah, to use the table to host guests. There you're using the table and elevating and directing its sparks toward the way they belong. And the same thing with everything else that belongs to us. Things that are prohibited, meaning you shouldn't own. So yes, those are things you should don't belong to you. Those means the things you should refrain from and avoid. But that's not what we're addressing here. So that's number one. So this could be antiques. This can be anything. It could be lessons that it teaches us. It could be lessons you learn from it. And we have to be creative and we have to be proactive in seeing what can we learn or how can we use this for some divine purpose. Okay. Now, as far as you mentioned things, is there good and bad energy? There's potential good. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya very clearly in chapter 6, he says klipas nega, which is really everything falls under the domain of klipas nega, except the things that are mitzvahs or the things that are asurim, that are not allowed, or things that must be done. Klipas nega is neutral. What's klipas nega? Literally, klipas nega means a husk, a translucent husk. You can see through it. Think of it like not a thick shell, but like the shell of the peel of a grape. What does that mean? Because the material world covers up, and it goes either way. You can use it for kedusha. So food is klipas nega, kosher food. You can use it for kedusha by using it to use the strength to do a mitzvah, to do good deeds, or God forbid, you can use that energy for something destructive. And then for lefisha, for temporarily, you're mated. You take that spark and you're descending it, you're degrading it and defiling it, and putting it in the domain of shalosh klipas hatmeis, in the negative, the things that are considered to be negative energy. So you can't really call it negative and positive until a human being does something with it. So potentially everything can be done. You can take a knife and use it to cut a challah, God forbid. You could take a knife and hurt someone. So simple examples. So that's essentially what as far as pre-owned goes, as I mentioned, if someone else sold, that means they had a time when they had to do their job with it, and now your role is now to use that object for the redeeming and elevating the sparks that are allocated to you. Now, as far as ever getting rid of objects, look, there are halachas, there are maybe having Chassidic mashpia. If you think there's an object in your possession that is causing something negative, it has to be dealt with case by case. I'm trying to think of an example. If there's something that's completely not prohibited, it shouldn't be by you. You should get rid of it. But destroying it is its repair. But things that, so you have to really give an example and then talk to a rav or talk to mashpia and see maybe that thing doesn't belong in your life. Okay, so I think I answered that question, and it's a very good question because it touches upon literally our daily lives, every interaction, everything we possess, everything we own, and how we see it in the context of what Chassidus explains. It's not just yours to protect or just yours to own, it's yours to elevate. That's the punchline. Next question. Next question is a topic I've talked about, but there are a lot of questions that come in. Either people have not heard me talk about it before, so I'm not going to just ignore the question. I'll refer to where it was discussed, or sometimes add a few points. And there are, of course, recurrent themes that are in people's minds, so I obviously indulge that as well in a good way. So this is one about women having to cover their hair. The questioner asks briefly, what is the source and reason for married women covering their hair? So this is, I talked about at length. Let me read the question and then refer you to where I spoke about it and maybe add a line or two. Rabbi Jacobson, first, bless you. Your classes have completely changed my look to life. Bless you. My silly question, which I know thousands of, or if not more, would benefit. I want to just protest. There's no such thing as a silly question. Every question is a healthy question. Question whether you know you. Sometimes it's obvious answer, sometimes it's less obvious. So I just wanted to comment before I continue. But thousands of if not more, would benefit from. And here it is. Please, would you explain what and where does a woman covering her hair come from? Is it written in the Torah? Is it something that came later? There's many who have different explanations, but your source would be a direct message from our Rebbe. Is it for the tznius, the blessings for the husband and sons? Is it for the woman to know her length and behavior to the outside? I guess her context, I'm not sure what this means. To know her role and behavior to the outside world. I cover my hair with a hat, half scarf, or kippah wig. I don't know if I feel I'm cheating and only doing half or don't connect to the actual covering due to lack of real explained meaning. I know so many women who are at loss in whether to cover or not, and others who completely hate the idea. I feel a clear understanding, a meaningful message would help many. Obviously, choice to all, but a clear understanding would be a big clarity for many women. We know many women cover their hair differently. Does every style make a difference in life blessing? Your answer would mean the world, for you are a continuous light of the Rebbe's teachings. Bless you 100-fold for your true work, making this world a brighter place, Baruch Hashem. So let me first refer you where I discussed this at length. These is episodes 95 through 97, 95, 96, and 97, and episode 201. Why do I refer you there? Because there I did a far more comprehensive take on it. I don't want to repeat what I've said then. There's no reason to. Same person speaking, you just click. It's a few clicks away. But I will say the following. It is absolutely based on Torah. It is the Chazal learn it, derive it from different verses. One about Parasha Nosei, where it talks about the Seita, about them uncovering her hair, which applies that she covered her hair, and other places. Especially when you go into the area of Zohar and the works of Kabbalah and Chassidus, there they talk about the power of hair, this powerful power, erotic power of hair, which is rooted in very deep spiritual places, which is what I elaborated upon back then in those episodes. Most people are simply not aware. They just think it's some type of either Gzeres HaKosev, or just a nuisance. So it's rooted in real sources. The Rebbe, of course, made a big fuss about it and asked women specifically, personally, to cover their hair. And dafka with a sheitel, not with a tichel, as elaborated then there as well. Above all, to put it briefly, hair, whether we know it or not, is a powerful sexual energy. And just like we cover other parts of the body, why do we cover it? Not because it's ugly, not because we're ashamed, not because it's disgraceful, but like we cover the Holy of Holies. The holiest part of our beings we cover, out of respect, out of dignity, out of preserving it to be experienced in the purest possible way. We live in a world that is far from pure, so it needs a protection, it needs to be covered to protect it, to be used in the clearest way without any contamination, if you wish. A woman's hair falls into that category. Sar Isha Erva, the Gemara says, but people misunderstand what it means. They think it's a negative. It's a positive. It has power. Sar Isha means a woman's hair. Now, of course, the question is, so why do girls who are before marriage don't cover? Why do men not have to cover their hair? And all the different things. That I leave to referring to where I spoke about it then at length. And I say again at length, relatively speaking, to this program. So in this case, I just want to conclude with this. Hair has a tremendous amount of power. And just like a human being has power in general, the feminine energy is very strong. When it's channeled and harnessed well, it can change worlds. When unfortunately it's abused or violated or not used well, it can actually also change worlds, but in the negative way. And that is why it's so vital, and the Rebbe made a very big thing about it, based on the Zohar and yes, the words, that the great blessings that it comes from it. The Gemara that talks about it as well, the woman that never uncovered her hair, even her hair was never exposed, even the walls of her house, meaning even when she was alone, and what the generations that grew out of that, the blessings that she received for it. So it's a source of tremendous blessing because the hair is a power of energy, powerful energy. So when harnessed properly, it brings great blessings. Let's stick to the positive side. How each person, each woman should adapt this and assimilate it in her life. Go step by step, learn about it. The more you know, the more informed you are, I think the more you'll be able to embrace it and see it as a beautiful thing, and like a crown a person wears on their head, not as a nuisance or just a bother or something that's you're doing without any logic behind it. Okay. The next question, which is also a topic that comes up once in a while, and I've addressed as well, is the topic of superstition. What attitude should we have to a superstition, Ayin Hora, and the likes? I don't know if I bunch all those exactly together. Superstition is Glatshtusim, meaning complete nonsense, superstition. Ayin Hora, there is a concept. The question is what attitude. So let me read the question more in detail, then I'll give you my response and first reference to previous episode. Dear Rabbi Simon, bless you 120 years for your endless kind work in this world. Rabbi, would you please give a few words regarding superstition, evil eye, and Yechi Hora? Please guide, direct many I know with this empty, exhausting mind game. Thank you, Rabbi Simon. So episode 99, one episode, I addressed this topic, quoting the Rebbe said that Ayin Hora affects only those that believe in it. So let's just start from the beginning, and I'll again just sum up, because more of the elaborate was discussed back in that episode. Tomim ti im Hashem Elokecha is the general principle in this week's Parshas Shoftim. We're going to be reading that next week, after the A, that is. Walk innocently, if you wish, simply, plainly with your God. In other words, don't look for gimmicks or tricks, which is a fundamental principle in general in Yiddishkeit. Do things called the poshet mailetve, in a simple, direct way. When people start looking for gimmicks, whether it's astrology or psychics and so on, even if there's legitimacy to some of that, and I've talked about this, it's not the way of the Torah. The Torah is a responsible approach to life. The fact that there are forces at work and it's very exotic and we're curious can also border on the sensational. So that's why when it comes to all types of things like superstitious things, people have different antics they go through because of their fears of a curse or something like that. It's not the Torah way. We're not under the control of mazolos, we're told. Even though there are mazolos. Mazolos are signs, the constellations. Because God governs the world with certain rules. So when you subject yourself to that, you are giving it power. Now it has power, but doesn't mean you have to be subject to its powers. Like a lot of things in life. We all have predispositions. That doesn't mean you have to give in to them. That's why a human being has self-control. So superstition in general, meaning taking anything and giving it some type of power over you, is not a general Jewish and Torah approach. And this does not contradict the fact that there are interpretations to dreams, and yes, there is a concept of mazel. We say mazel tov. These are things I've spoken about as well in previous episodes, including back in episode 99. Ayin Hora. So we have Ayin Hora, we say. There should be no evil eye. And we have, you see, before a bris, a child is born, you put up all kinds of different kameas and other things that are so-called to ward off any negative energy. There's the concept of negative energy. The question is, does it control your life? And the answer is absolutely not. It does not control your life. It can control your life if you allow it in. It's like anything. It's like a human being. There are people, for example, that are difficult to deal with. And they really get on our nerves. But you control whether they'll get to you or not. If you allow them in, yes, then you'll be vulnerable to them. If you allow yourself to immunize yourself, you allow yourself to rise above, they won't affect you. We have that ability. Doesn't mean it's always easy, and there's different ways and methods. Here's not the place to discuss it. The same thing is with the positive and negative energies out there. So that's the general answer. Yechi Hora, we all have a Yechi Hora, that's an evil inclination, doesn't mean you have to act on it. The whole Tanya is based on controlling that and directing it and harnessing it in the right direction. So, and above all, to be afraid, to go to sleep with fear or to tremble. And people literally are afraid because they think there's a curse upon them. In letter after letter after letter, when the Rebbe writes about these things, he always dismisses it, saying it has no control over you. Think betochen, trust in God. Trach good, v'zayin good, think good, it will be good, and all different expressions, teaching us what? Not that there is a negative energy. That has no power over you. That's a big key thing. And if you want a simple example, based on Tanya, chapter 26, where it talks about what depression does, it demoralizes you not to feel the strength that you have to wrestle with your enemy. So in psychological warfare, every sports, athletics, and even actual war, how much of it is psychological? If you think your enemy is stronger than it really is, you allow it, you give it power. When you think the enemy is not as strong, you wean away its power and you become stronger. So this, of course, applies to every area of life. Okay. It's about empowerment. Knowing you have a neshama, and your neshama is stronger than all these forces. That doesn't mean these forces you don't contend with, but there's ways to approach it. And we'll be reading in a few weeks. You'll go out to war. You're always above your adversary. Okay. Next question is this. Do current events have any deeper connection with the Hebrew dates when they occur? And here's how it was phrased. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. I find that many historic events that the President of the United States declares or other similar events happen on special days in the Jewish or even Chabad calendar. He refers to a few examples. This was written a while ago. So he's referring to, he says, everyone found out back in February 14th, 2019, the president's concrete intention on declaring national emergency and funding building a wall. And what was that connected to? What day was that? I'm not even sure. Would the Rebbe say anything about what we can learn from this by Fabrengen, this Shabbos, if this was prior to, for example, Gimel Tammuz? I'm speaking about what we can learn from this, and not if a wall is right or wrong, if building a wall is right or wrong. Oh, it happened on Tes Adar, that's what it is, the 9th of Adar, when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America. Tes Adar is a special day. Did the Frierdiker Rebbe speak about a wall or its significance on this day, or the 10th of Adar, when he initially came to America? Looking forward to hearing something insightful. So this, of course, applies across the board, any type of event. The answer goes back to what I mentioned before about objects, the Baal Shem Tov, Hashgacha Pratis. There's Hashgacha Pratis to the extent the Rebbe once mentioned, I think from the Chassam Sefer, I'm not sure if he mentioned who it was, that they would learn lessons even when they traveled on a train, and the train had a number on it. If you were in number 1, number 2, number 3, there were lessons learned from those numbers. You could say it's completely random. You could have been in the other car. But there's no such thing as random. So applying it to this even more so, things that happen a particular day, yes, have a connection to the day. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not obvious. There's an expression in the Gemara, Megalgin schus liyem zakeh, and also on the negative, which means Megalgin schus. Megalgin means it like turns, like a wheel. That ends up being that something of merit happens to take place. Megalgin, it's like roll to, is directed to, but I'm trying to find the exact words. It's like rolling that schus. Hashem makes sure that schus is rolled until it reaches the Yom Zakeh, the meritus day where that merit belongs. And the same thing in a negative thing. So things that happen on Tisha B'Av, first Tisha B'Av was when the Meraglim came back and made the Jewish people cry over the bad report about Eretz Yisrael. On that day would later be the 5 tragic events that the Mishnah says, including the destruction, the burning down of the first temple and the second temple, and the other events that happened. Same thing with the 17th of Tammuz on the negative. On the positive, yes, you could have events that happen on first day of Pesach or on Purim or on Sukkot. So it's not a random thing. If it happened, it means it's connected in some way to the positive or negative energy of that particular day. Because remember, time is energy and every day has its particular. Now, to go bend backwards and try to find the connection, sometimes it'll be obvious, sometimes Hashem doesn't make it obvious. So I don't know if we have to turn it into a study, but the general answer is yes, but we don't have to go crazy to find it, because if we need to find it, we'll be told, and sometimes it's very obvious. And the Rebbe often, in Fabrengens, would take the day of the calendar, using a sefer called Var Yem B'Yemei, would say things happen on that day, and look what happened now, Shgacha Pratis on that day. So clearly we can derive from that there's connections. And this can be connected also to our birthdays and other special events in our lives. But as I said again, we don't want to turn this into a sensational journey. We want it to be a meaningful one with responsible conclusions, which means it should lead us to good actions. That's the bottom line. That when you see something of schus comes your way on a certain day, happens on your birthday or happens on another special day, to turn it into, okay, so that lesson for me is that I should increase in good deeds connected to that particular schus, that particular merit. And not just stick to the sensational component. Look what happened on that day. Wow, isn't it interesting? It's not enough just interesting. It has to lead us to some Avedis Hashem, some Hera, some directive in our serving God, in becoming better people and better Jews and better relationship both with Hashem and Ben Adam L'Chavere with others. Okay. Next question. Do you recommend reading books on intimacy by known rabbis and teachers? So examples were sent to me, but as usually I don't like to mention names of authors or books, especially if it's people throwing aspersions or questions or doubts on the validity of those books. So let's just keep it in general. The person writes, I don't know if you've read this in this book, but you recommend that Chassidim should read it. I don't mean to put you at odds with that author or different authors that have written different books. But I want to have a non-biased opinion, not by the author, obviously, but someone who's not written it. And I trust a worthy opinion. I'm a bocher, and I want to know I should read it, or should I wait till I get married, or should I never read it? So I want to expand on the questions. This is not about, every book obviously is the responsibility of the author. If it's a legitimate rabbi and teacher and is respected and trusted and in general is proven to be someone that has an authority, so that's what defines what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. If there's a question mark because the book may be controversial or there are different opinions, so there I would refer you to your rav or your mashpia. Let them give you their opinion. Overall, in a broader way, you could say is, should we be reading books altogether on matters of this nature, even if they're written by rabbis and teachers? Maybe their intention is to reach people who don't learn Torah. If you can learn it directly in the original sources of Chassidus and in Torah, why do you need to read books? On the other hand, sometimes a book presents it in a palatable way, in a way that's accessible and easier to use. I mean, I wrote a book, Torah Meaning for Life. So there is a chapter on intimacy there. I'm biased. Would I say go read that instead of reading the Sichos or Torah? Absolutely not. But if it could help explain Torah or present Torah in a relevant way, then perhaps. But that you have to ask your Rav and Mashpia. Generally speaking, but then there's of course the question whether should a book be written on these topics. There have been books written, even though they're written, even if they're correct technically. Do you write a whole book on intimacy, for example? It's a good question. Because you can write everything right, but intimacy by definition maybe shouldn't be written about. Maybe it should be more of a discreet approach. On the other hand, you could say we live in a world today that people are not going to all come to you for personal advice. So write a book can actually help people discover a deeper and more sacred view on intimacy. So arguments go back and forth. And that's why you have to come down to who is the person asking the question. Is it a 17-year-old bocher should be reading a book on intimacy in English? Probably not. If he's getting married and that book is well recommended and well sourced and grounded and Torah-based, so it's like learning chassan classes or kala classes. So again, it depends on where you are, who you are, and what you need. Someone had given me an example of a book years ago. Someone had written about intimacy. Some people loved the book; it was really helpful to them. Others did not. Different people have different views on a book. But someone asked me. I said, "Look, you can write a book about tznius in a very non-tzniistic way. A person could stand on Brooklyn Bridge and talk about the beauty of modesty, and standing there in a way that's immodest. So, what do you say about that? Obviously, there's a confusion there. You can't talk about modesty in an immodest way. It has to be talked about in a modest way. But as I said, there are many arguments in the case because we live in a world where sometimes desperate times need desperate measures, but always in the context of halacha, with tznius, with subtlety. The Rebbe was very careful. In my chapter on intimacy and Torah Meaning for Life, I quote a letter from the Rebbe about teaching children or teaching students about matters of intimacy, that the Rebbe takes very care in saying it should be done very discreetly by a teacher who presents it discreetly and subtly, not in a way that's provocative or sensational or controversial. So talking about these matters always needs great care, and sometimes so you could say the right thing but the wrong way. And there's another thing that you have to consider. So I'm not going to paskin or rule here on a particular book, on a particular author, or on a particular person, because there's so many factors involved. But I do believe I just put things into a framework, frame the question in a way that hopefully, shaylas chacham chesed tshuva, that when you ask your mashpia or rav, you can get a very clear answer, what is fitting for you under those circumstances. Right. Next question. Why is there so much conflict? Why is there such conflict about saying Yechi? So those of you listening don't know what that is. Maybe it's better that way. Here's the way the question was phrased in its entirety. Why is that the opposition of Yechi has to do with Gimel Tammuz? In other words, post Gimel Tammuz began the disagreements. Why do Lubavitchers have to argue? Isn't it pretty clear that the Rebbe said that the nation should say Yechi to add chayis, energy, vitality to the melech, to the king? That's Beis Nisan Tov Shemem Ches, just for the source. And if for whatever reason you don't say Yechi, why do you have to argue? Not meaning you, but rather Lubavitch as a whole. So firstly, let me refer you to episodes 46 and 264 where I spoke about the topic. Arguments are never good. Let's start with a clear statement. Arguments is hepachatera, people should not argue. I'm not talking about arguments l'shem shamayim, where you're arguing the subtleties of a pshat or the direct interpretation like Shammai and Hillel or other explanations and understanding Torah. But if an argument becomes personal and becomes negative and becomes critical and personalized, that's never a good thing. Even if one person is right, one person is wrong, there's ways to disagree in a loving way, in a kind way, and never in a way that's condescending and judgmental and all the other negative things. So that's clear and must be stated. So I have the same question as you. I don't understand why any people argue. I understand people can become passionate and very strong, and some people say by saying it you're causing damage, so therefore I'm angry, not because I'm angry, because you're causing damage to the Rebbe, the Chabad, and the Chassidus, and so on. But sometimes I see, is it really purely for the cause, or you are personally angry? That needs to also be determined. And the same with the other way around. Those that say you don't say it, means you're a kafir, you don't believe, you're deny, and they get angry. So I don't see the anger, the personalizing. You have a disagreement, let it be a disagreement. And always looking into a sefer, seeing what the Rebbe said, how different people interpret it. And yes, before Gimel Tammuz, there was more consensus, and later more disagreement. What does that say about everything? I'm not even going to go into that right now because it's not really relevant. I just want to make the point that machlekes is never good disagreements. I'm not going to go explain why there are disagreements, try to justify it. I do understand sometimes the reasons, but that doesn't mean that's correct. And I think if everybody lowered the volume and lowered the temperature, it would always be healthier. And you can have a legitimate conversation what the Rebbe meant and what way to do it, or whether it's something where, you know what, live and let live, do whatever it is you see fit, and you don't have to become an anti or become a for, and be more neutral about it, those that want to say it personally. Definitely people should not impose their opinion on others. Different people have different needs, different people have different meanings in it. And more than that, I already rely on what I've discussed in those previous episodes. Okay. I wanted to refer to intimacy in the previous topic. I forgot to cross-reference. I also spoke about what is healthy intimacy and how to present it in episodes 59, 151, and 272. Okay. One more question, then we'll do follow-up, then the Chassidus question, then the essays. That's the lay of the land. Next question, does iskafya apply to pregnant women? To a pregnant woman. Thank you for your wonderful classes. I've gained so much, and I'm sure a lot of time and effort goes into preparing. I do appreciate it. I've been learning the daily Tanya over the last couple of days and hearing a lot about iskafya, controlling one's desires. Some people call it refraining, abstaining. Does iskafya apply to a pregnant woman? If yes, how can she implement it when it comes to cravings that she has, etc.? I know that Shulchan Aruch does not take this matter lightly because it discusses it during the halachas of fasting Yom Kippur. What does Chassidus have to say about this? Thank you. So firstly, I want to refer you to episode 207. It's not direct topic covered there, but just it touches upon some of these topics. Let's begin very basic here. Comes to a pregnant woman, comes to anything connected to life, the bearing of life, the preserving of life, health. Torah v'chai b'hem. You shall live by Torah, not God forbid the opposite. And we completely focus, per primary number one, is the welfare of that person, the pregnant woman, and of course the child she's carrying with her. And that's why when it comes to fasting or other things, we find all kinds of leniencies, and we don't look to be more firm than God in this, or more firm in general. Now, it comes to Yom Kippur, yes, Yom Kippur is the most serious day. So Rabbanim will give you an answer. Pregnant women will be very lenient. If there's even a doubt, if it doesn't make a difference or it's not any risks, it's another story, and Rabbanim will address that, and I'm not going to paskin on those matters. As far as iskafya is Avedis Hashem. A pregnant woman, her being pregnant is the greatest iskafya. The discomfort she has to endure. Not that I know of it firsthand, but I understand it and I witnessed it. The discomfort she has to endure, the nausea, all the other pains that are involved that came because of Chetei Sadas is the greatest iskafya. Why would she want to? It's part of the process. So I don't think a pregnant woman has to look for new additional iskafyas. She has a craving. It's a craving because she's pregnant. It's not a craving because she only has a taiva. Why God made that she should have a craving. Now, if a woman feels a craving that she thinks is inappropriate or she wants to limit it or curb it, that's her personal thing. But I'm not going to hear, and I don't think any Rav or mashpia should get involved in that. That's her personal thing. But even there, I would say, take it easy. Your biggest iskafya is what you're going through in having a child, the Mesiras Nefesh of a mother bearing a child. And that iskafya outweighs all other iskafyas. That's my short and sweet answer on this matter. And be at ease and at comfort. You're doing the greatest possible thing. You're bringing a God's neshama, a soul, into a new child, into a new person. And that is the greatest schus, the greatest merit. And everything else, pales in comparison. So save iskafya for other times, or save it in general, especially when you're a mother, a nursing mother, a mother that's given birth to that child, a kippatan, whatever they call it. So it extends even after the pregnancy. And the iskafya has to be used with discretion. I generally think that the iskafya, maybe your husband should be practicing more iskafya, and some of the men who often, I remember once being in a delivery room, not delivery room, I didn't want that, in the delivery department, and I was out in the hall, and I saw a guy, his wife is being carried into to deliver. She was expecting it, but baby was about to be born, and he faints. Not she, he faints. So he probably should be doing a little more iskafya, especially he didn't have to endure any of that pain. And that doesn't mean iskafya doesn't apply to women in general, but in general iskafya is more of a, I would say, to curb and to tame the more masculine aggression than the women's gentleness. Now, everybody can use it to some extent, but I think I put it in the context I wanted to. But it's a good question, and thank you for that. Okay, follow-up. So first follow-up we're going to do is something from episode 248, a little while back. They're talking about the topic of a male mashpia for women. And of course, basically negating the idea, definitely on a permanent or on an ongoing level. We're not talking about a lecture or something like that. So that was back in 248, and you can look it up. But here someone sent a follow-up. Amazing how many people mislisten to what you say or miss the nuance. Anyway, my father has told over the following. I hope I have all the details correct. If you want to say it over, you can always confirm with him. Well, my father was a younger man, married, I think, 2-3 years, and teaching high school girls in Detroit. Rab Mendel Fatefas used to come visit every year. He would go to the boys' classes, verheer them, test them, and give out rozenkes mandlin, raisins and almonds. My father asked him to come to his girls' class, and Rab Mendel declined. Upon further discussion, my father figured out he didn't want to come because it was a girls' class. So my father asked, I'm a younger man, and I'm allowed to teach them? Am I allowed to teach them? But you, I'm a young man, I'm allowed to teach them. But you, an ältere chassid, older chassid, mit a weißer Bart with a white beard, can't come talk to them for a few minutes? Rab Mendel responded, ich bin ein älterer chassid, schweig und folg mir. If I'm an older chassid, as you put it, be quiet and listen to what I said. That's the story. I've never heard a good explanation to the story. My guess is as good as yours. But the only thing I can come up with is that in our generation, the Rebbe gave us special keiches to deal with various shlichis, various missions as needed. And maybe Rab Mendel said this was a thing he had to learn to develop at his stage. Anyway, I think, as I explained it back then, is pretty clear the approach to take to this. But since this came in as a story, I added to the equation, to the record. Now, vaccines, still no more questions coming in, thank God. Well, I don't know if thank God is the right way. I think we covered almost everything. But since there are some questions I didn't address, I thought I would take one more and then slowly either finish up with it. But this was covered in episodes 269 through 273. So we covered it pretty extensively, probably more than most topics. So one more question I'll read. In response to your answer about the Rebbe's view on vaccination, I would like to ask a follow-up question. If a family has a child who had an adverse reaction to a vaccine, such as repetitive seizures, what would the Rebbe's view be on vaccinating other children in the same family? Would this still be the same if there are other members of the extended family have also had the same and other adverse reactions? Would the Rebbe's view of getting a second opinion from a doctor who is expert in the subject matter, one who acknowledges adverse reaction to vaccines, be relevant in this type of case? Would this be an exception to the rule? Is this something the Rebbe discussed? The Rebbe, above all, this isn't just the Rebbe. The Rebbe is going with Torah approach. I'm responding. The Torah approach is mishmatim leiden afshesechem. You have to be a healthy person. The Torah gives gives permission to legitimate, authoritative, and appropriate and responsible doctors to determine what's a healthy situation. That's halacha says. If you want to know what is health, is it danger to someone, is it not danger, you ask a doctor. And then the Torah is giving that, whatever the doctor says, 2 opinions, 3 opinions, bottom line, the consensus of the doctors, then the Torah gives the power of Torah to that issue, just like a psak halacha. If indeed there's a adverse reaction, the Rebbe is not going to say, go give a vaccine and put the child in danger. Obviously, the answer is, as the doctor, let the doctor, the personal family doctor, or someone who knows the situation, and say, what should we do? We have one child that has adverse reactions. Should we risk it with another child? And let the doctor make the decision. If you see in the family people are reversed, they're allergic or something else, obviously the vaccine is not the right thing to do because of the risks. This is part of medical decisions made all the time. It's not only vaccinations, in many areas. You go to a doctor, they find that you're allergic to certain things, they're not going to give you a medication, or they may not do certain interventions, etc., etc. So the Rebbe has definitely spoken about this, but the answer is always the straight answer, which is what the medical profession has to say. Not quack doctors, not only marginal, but get good doctors. If you need more than one opinion, get more than one opinion, get the consensus, do due diligence, do what's necessary. We're talking about lives here. And the risk, and if there are risks, absolutely, look at it. All that we spoke about was the Rebbe said that there are vaccines or other things that have gone through testing and have been proven to work. Does that mean 100%? Obviously, there's always going to be exceptions. That's why we have to use our wisdom, but we have to also understand that there is a Torah approach and a medical approach to things, and you have to weigh everything into account. There are many people who take vaccines and don't have adverse reactions. Remember, we have to remember that as well. So all things have to be taken into account. Okay. Another question was regarding this. Regarding vaccination, what does tried and proven mean? What does reliable manufacturers mean when manufacturers have liability removed? Why is it so vital? Why is it vital for children to receive the flu shot and varicella? What about kids that had serious reaction and parents' fears for their life, but according to law still can't get a medical exemption? Look, I don't know every nuance and every detail, but we live in a world where you have pretty much freedom to do things. So taking one question at a time. Tried and proven, there's words in halacha what means tried and proven. If something has been proven for a period of time, and you have a consensus of enough legitimate doctors that say this is acceptable, and yes, the doctors are objective. If you prove that the doctors are subjective and they're biased and prejudiced because they were bought off, is one thing. That would be tried and proven, like anything in life. How do you know if someone's a tried and proven pharmacist, a tried and proven carpenter, a tried and proven plumber, a tried and proven contractor? You ask around, you get references, and you find a consensus on it. Reliable manufacturers, the same thing. Like in any business, were you going to buy a product from a business? Are they reliable? Can they be trusted? There are ways to do research on these matters. If you start tearing everybody apart, there's no company on earth. Forget about medical and pharmaceutical, which may be more abused than others. There's always going to be issues. That's why you need to do research and properly. Why they need the flu shots or varicella, that you have to ask a doctor. I'm not going to answer that question. And if there are reactions and side effects, I just discussed that, obviously that has to be taken into account. Okay, let's go now to the Chassidus question. Chassidus question is in short like this. How can we make sense of the different ways that Jews practice Judaism when we have only one God and one Torah? Here's how the questioner writes it out in more detail. Serious uncertainty, he titles it, or it's a she, I'm not sure. I have a question that has been bothering me for some time. Much of the study of Judaism, such as the Talmud, is filled with debates. Even in Jewish law, there is debate, such as between the Rambam and his colleagues, or the Beis Yosef and Rav Isalis, the Ramah, Ramesh Ishalish. But from what I've learned, that all makes sense because there can be truths on different spiritual levels. And the origin of the sages' souls also matters. So he's referring to, just to elaborate, that you have, for example, Shammai coming from Gvura, Hillel from Chesed, that affects their opinions. But what I really do not understand is how there can be two practical truths, as in how do Sfardim and Ashkenazim hold differently in actual practice, or how is there different versions of prayer books. I don't mean a minor custom or stringency, rather I mean real big differences. How can there be an argument about if the Torah should have a aleph or a hey by psua dako? and different people do different things. One is for sure wrong. Do we need to wear a hat and jacket for davening? Do people that do not wear one do something they should not? As in, would it be ideal for all to wear a jacket and hat? Like, did God want different laws for different Jews, not better or worse, just different? Where do we see that this was God's intention? How do we know that this is what God wanted and not some technicality? I understand it is all divine providence, but is there a source for this idea? Can you find these ideas in the Torah? To summarize, how does it make sense that there can be two Jews practicing Judaism two different ways if we have one God and one Torah? Okay. So first I refer you to episode 92, where I discuss some of this. But let's just step back a bit. And Chassidus does address this directly, and not only Chassidus, other Sfarim as well. So first of all, let's start all the way from the beginning. Torah is God's blueprint for life, which means Staka bar Aiso bar Alma. He looked into the Torah, and with that he created the world. In Medrash, the expression is that like an architect uses pisrois or pinkasois, a blueprint, the Torah is that blueprint. So Torah is not just laws superimposed over existence, it's actually the creator of existence is telling us the halachas and Torah what apply to each situation. The same God that created the blueprint for the universe meaning all of us as well, the human beings, created human beings diverse. We're not clones. Ein de'esein shavis, our minds think differently. Ein partzafein shavis, our faces look differently. So even though we all originate from Adam Arishan, as the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin, that we all from Chesmei, from the seal of Adam, from the original parent, Adam and Chava, but each one has a different variation. We're a lot of things that are similar, but we have different variations. So how does then the Torah fit to that? Does the Torah want one way for everybody to do the same thing? When people have different approaches to things. Look in Parsha Nosei, and you see all the Nisim, the leaders of the tribes, they brought karbonis to dedicate the Mishkan, the temple. And it repeats the same thing. They all brought the same thing, the wagons and the karbonis, the offerings, and so on and so forth. Ask the Rebbe, why do you have to repeat it again and again? Say it once and say the rest, brought the same thing, to make the emphasis that even though they brought the same object, they brought it with a different kavanah. Because Reuven has one role, Shimon has another. That's why when they crossed Kriyas Yamsuf, everyone went on their path. So there are things that equalize and are a common denominator among us all. Shabbos. But how do you keep Shabbos? I'm not talking about the halachas now, the spirit of Shabbos. We all say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. But what's the kavanah in the Echad, in the Shema? Even the same person shouldn't have the same kavanah intention when they say Shema different times of the day. Definitely two different people. So we could be doing the same thing but with different intentions. We could also be doing this, the purpose of it is the same and doing it in different ways. Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin. Both are there to be Meshabed the Lev and the Me'ach, to bind the mind and the heart. But Rashi held that the Parshas, the 4 chapters are placed in a certain order, and Rabbeinu Tam in a different order. Each one thought that was the way, because the Torah itself did not spell it out. So it's very likely during Moshe Rabbeinu's times, there were those that put it on like way later. Rashi would be called Rashi's tefillin, and some Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. Pesach. So Sfardim did not have the issue of kitnius, like rice, for whatever reasons. We're not getting now with it, the mixing and so on. That means they're not keeping Pesach. In their communities, Pesach, all the power of Pesach is done, even though they eat kitnius. They're not in any way more lenient. So even not just in intention that Shammai is Gvura and Hillel is Chesed, but also in Halacha you could have different Pesukim. Ba'asad the Rav, in the city of Rav, the Halacha was like Rav. Ba'asad the Shmuel, in the city of Shmuel, the Halacha was like Shmuel. Each one had their way, they had their students that were aligned in that path. There are times where in Torah, in history, they decided to make a Hachra, which means that even though there were two approaches halachically, like Shammai and Hillel, the students of Shammai followed Hillel's rulings. The students of Hillel followed the Hillel's rulings. And then there came a Baskol that said, no, time has come that we should find one halacha that everybody's going to follow. So when those instances happen, that becomes the ruling. That still does not negate Shammai's theory. It's still legitimate in the world of Gvura, Shammai's theory, but in action, even Shammai has to behave like Hillel. And where did we know this from? Achrei rabim lahates. There's a pasuk in Mishpatim that says, follow the consensus. What do you mean the consensus? The Torah says, do this, don't do that. So the Medrash and the Chazal explain. Because when Moshe was on the mountain, Hashem didn't just give him laws. There were things, halacha l'Moshe Messinai, bar mitzvahs at 13, bas mitzvah at 12, different shiurim. There were things in the written Torah, this is it, tefillin, Shabbos. But then there was a lot of nuances. How do you do Shabbos exactly? When it says don't light a fire on Shabbos, does that mean not to light a fire or not to sit in light like the Tzdukim interpreted? So the Hashem taught Moshe, Torah b'pirusha nitna, Torah with its commentary, and explained. And he said, here's a way to interpret it like this, 49 ways to interpret this way, 49 ways to interpret it that way. So Moshe is waiting and saying to Hashem, no. So Hashem says, Achrei rabim lahatis. I'm giving you the theories. Now you guys have to discuss it. You guys, meaning the people, the Bnei Torah, the Sanhedrin. And Achrei rabim, follow the consensus. Now consensus could be one way, and then in the next generation can be a different consensus. And then things that are rulings that remain those rulings. And there are things till this day that are done by different communities in different ways. All this, on the contrary, demonstrates the beauty of a Torah applying itself to the diversity of life. And yet there's a tremendous harmony, because we're all doing with the same, ultimately the same purpose, just different ways. So that accounts for the differences, while it being a Torah achas and Hashem achad. That achdus manifests itself in many different applications, all with the same unifying spirit. It's all to connect to God. There's no such thing as a mitzvah that's not connected to God, God forbid. But how the connection and the details, that can be different from one community to the next, from one psak to another psak, even in action. So I hope that answers the question. And with that, we go over to the essays of this week. So we've been doing, every week we do 3 essays. This is from the last essay contest 2019. These are still the top 50, 60 essays among the hundreds and hundreds that came in. So essay number 1 is, let me just get my papers here. To be free from fear, Moshe Backman, age 27, Kingston, Pennsylvania. Teacher at Cheder Menachem, Luzerne, Kingston, Pennsylvania. Upon hearing these words from his father, Yisrael became an orphan. Yisrael meaning the Baal Shem Tov. Fear is a natural feeling, a response that results from situations of vulnerability and possible danger. One would expect a child at the tender age of 5, having lost both parents with vast unknown and impending difficulties, to drown in his worries. With this message which his father left him, though, he would grow to be the Baal Shem Tov and develop the Chassidic approach to overcoming all life's challenges. And that is, Rabbi Yisrael, fear nothing but God. Goes on to analyze this very powerful essay, the challenge of fear, the proper approach of dealing with it, the responsibility, and implementing it in action. A good essay, excellent essay, and this essay is posted, as we speak, is being posted at chassidusapplied.com, as well as the other 2 essays. You can also receive them in your inbox when you subscribe to our emails. The next essay is Soul Challenge by Moises Perez, age 25, Cordoba, Argentina, student Mayanot Men, and his job is is an entrepreneur. And he writes, Soul Challenge. Imagine we had the possibility to observe our world from above. What would we see? We would see a complex world with landscapes, towering mountains, blue lakes, exotic beaches, and a network of roads. Goes on to describe. But there's also another reality, the one experienced by those who live in homes which lack values. There are people who live with little hope, lives full of anger and intolerance, divorce and infidelity, disloyalty and unhappiness. In this essay, we want to raise the root of the problem and possible solution using the Chassidic concepts of the godly soul and the animal soul. And basically the 2 perspectives on life, understanding the root of our habit, analyzing child behavior. How do these habits affect adults? How can we change them? Animal soul versus godly soul. And then application in everyday situations. Paradigm shift from animal vision to human vision, soul challenge, our choice. Yes. So another comprehensive essay on this topic, the challenges where you see life on one hand, the beauty, On the other hand, we see the challenges and how to deal with that. Good. Very good essay. And finally, a Hebrew essay, Geva Mishkal Umayna Tza'adim. Okay, height, weight, and measuring steps. Basically, pacing life. He writes in Hebrew, I'm translating loosely. All of us want to be successful. But we see that in actuality it only comes intermittently. And we're still looking for ways to find success. And to say I'm a successful person. And especially this challenges in the 21st century has unique elements to it. So what is the definition of success? What considered success before we describe whether we are successful? So in this essay, we're going to attempt to answer the question through three tools according to Chassidus. Goiva, height, mishkal, weight, and menesodim, and pacing yourself step by step. And he takes those three so-called measuring rods, and applies it to life. Very interesting essay, very creative, and applies it to different life situations, with the conclusion of how one reaches real success. A lot of good stories, a lot of good anecdotes. I personally enjoyed this essay. I enjoyed most of the essays, all the essays. I could say each one has their own flavor. As I mentioned before, the diversity of different perspectives. So with that, we conclude this week's My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 274. Everyone should have this coming Shabbos a very powerful Chodesh Elul. Should be a blessed Chodesh Elul, Chodesh HaCheshbon, where we make an accounting for the past year and a preparation for the new year. Since Chamisha above, there's a custom already to wish each other Ksiva v'Chsima Teva. Some people write that it's the gematria of Chamisha above. And therefore, I use this opportunity to extend the Ksiva v'Chsima Teva begashmis and beruchnis to everyone. In the month of Elul, we begin to also sign our letters that way, blessing people. And it should be a blessed year, a year of Geula, Hamitis v'Ashlema, and that should happen even before the new year, ready before Elul. Going from the month of Av, that turns right away into a month of Geula, and therefore we'll march into Elul and to Tishrei with the Geula, Hamitis v'Ashlema, Mashiach Tzidkenu. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. My Life Chassidus Applied. Thank you so much.